Hey everybody, we are back. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction, coming at you with a book review today, which I don't do very often because I don't read a lot of books. Because of time considerations, it takes me a lot of time to read books, and that's why I read comic books, because they're fast and I can get back to my own writing when I do things. But this is a science fiction book. It's by Poul Anderson. Poul Anderson is one of the greats of science fiction. He was primarily popular from the 50s to the 70s, kept writing into the 90s to where he unfortunately passed away due to old age, and he has a very prolific library, part of which includes this series of the Technic Civilization, as you see on the cover, which follows the exploits mostly, because there's others in here too, of this character Dominic Flandry. In this volume, he's dubbed Sir Dominic Flandry. He's a Knight of Terra, which is the Earth Empire. But he goes through the series as an ensign, as a captain, etc., as these books progress along. Now, it's a very interesting series. The series, while they do progress through his life, and you see him as a younger man, and then as a more experienced captain, and now finally as a kind of an older knight, I guess, they're not really connected. They don't really reference each other so much. It's very much like the old James Bond movies, where you would see this character who goes out and performs his service on behalf of the Empire, comes back, he has his Bond girl of the movie, and it goes away. And this is exactly what the format is for Poul Anderson's series right here. So you get exactly the same sort of thing as you get in those Bond movies, where they're not really connected, even though they do kind of progress. What does progress, though, is this empire. And Dominic Flandry is all about preserving the Earth Empire, which has lasted for a long, long time. And he sees signs of decay and decadence, and he is trying to stave off its pending doom. And we see we have an old man emperor to start. He gets replaced by a guy who's kind of a fop, and then he later gets replaced by like a military emperor who's kind of bringing things back together towards the end of the Flandry legacy here. All right, so what I actually just read was not this entirety of this volume, which has, I believe, 3 novels in it, something like that. I read the last one, which is called A Night of Ghosts and Shadows, and this one it feels like a later work of Poul Anderson. I actually don't know the chronology of what he wrote here. But the chronology of the books and all the stories, there's a bunch of short stories as well, are contained in the back. So you can kind of piece things together and see where each of these falls. And let's see, the Plague Masters, Hunters of the Sky Cave, those are both in this volume. The Warriors from Nowhere, and then The Night of Ghosts and Shadows. So we're right here within the chronology. All right, so in this one, he's a little bit older, and he's had a lot of Bond girls over the course of things, and so he's got illegitimate children running around, and there is an illegitimate son in this who he meets up with at first. Dominic is not really happy with his son. It's got a weird relationship. And as usual, the theme of these stories is he's going off to some border world and dealing with threats from a group called the Mercians, who are trying to tear the human empire apart. And so this one, they have a rebellious faction going on. It starts out with a girl who is helping lead one of those, or at least we're told she is. She gets mind wiped and reprogrammed as a slave. And she ends up being shipped off from her little rebel world there. And of course, Dominic Flandry picks her up and buys her slave contract. And it looks, at first, there's a lot of tension between them, of course, a lot of sexual tension and everything, as she is, going to be used in that manner. In theory, of course, Dominic does not do so, the noble hero that he is. And he actually just wants her for the information of what happened in the rebellion. And so he kind of coaxes that out of her for a bit. There's a part where she kind of runs away, and then he gains her trust. Very nice relationship story. The only problem with the relationship story is I've read so many of the fleeting Bond girl moments in the other stories before this that it's kind of like, you get into it and you're like, another one? Jeez. And he has that attitude in there where he realizes he's kind of gone through a lot of females in his time, and it just kind of leaves you with a little bit of an icky sense about the character. But that is the character and who it is, and he deals with that. There's a place in here where there's a bored noble housewife who's very interested in him, and he has a fleeting moment with her also, and that's what happens. I've noticed in Paul Anderson stories there's a lot of marital troubles and infidelity problems in general with his books. And I don't know what happened in his life. Apparently, he was very happily married to this gal Karen, who actually just passed away about a year ago. But he tends to write about these sorts of things. Maybe it was about his life as a kid. Who knows? Who knows where all that came from psychologically? I don't, and I can't ask him because he's not around anymore. But I don't enjoy that aspect of it terribly much. But in this one, Flandre finally falls in love with this slave girl and is ready to marry her. This one's going to be different. This is the only woman he's ever, at least he claims, is ever really interested in on that level, and it progresses on that also. So she runs away as he's trying to get information out of her. He's hoping she runs back to her rebels. She does. And he finds her, but it turns out that her rebels were really controlled by the Mercians, who are trying to take down humanity rather than actually do some noble cause on behalf of this world's freedom or whatnot, like she thought. So she becomes disillusioned, realizes Flandre was right. He psychologically probes her. They become closer. That's where they build their relationship after that escape element. And Flandre realizes this is the work of his arch nemesis, dun dun dun, whose name is like Achiak or Achiarch or Akiak or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it, and it's a very weird spelling. But basically, that character is a alien who has been hounding Flandre throughout several different stories. And it's basically the Moriarty to the Sherlock Holmes as Flandre uncovers the mysteries. Now, the mystery element of what's going on is really not there because it's pretty telegraphed that this guy is going to be it. And the fact that they go through there and Flandre kind of knows what it is, it's the weakest element of the plot, to be honest. So, but there is a cool twist in it, after all. So Flandre realizes it's him. He and Kosara, who's the gal, they go and deal with their little insurrection and show up on the planet, spend some time together. It's really actually drawn out on the relationship side a little too much also. This is one of the slower Paul Anderson books. Most of them are pretty rip-roaring up until this point. And she then convinces her people not to rebel, and then they join a fleet, and they go after the architect of all the Mercian deals, which is this Archiarch, whatever his name is. And they go to his planet. They find his planet, where he's from, and Flandre is ready to just torch the place, as he's been a big pain in the butt for a long time. But they go down to the planet, and here's the twist, is that this guy's put up all these holograms and all these weird things to make it look like there's this thriving civilization. And he's done it not for the humans' behalf, because he's hidden his existence from the humans, but for the Mercians who he's working for, to kind of create an air of mystery about him so that it makes it look like the Mercians have this Mercians think he has this big information network, when it's really just him and a bunch of shadows, hence why the title is a Night of Ghosts and Shadows. The Night of Ghosts and Shadows does not refer to Dominic, but instead refers to his nemesis. And so, things blow up. Dominic wins the day. It turns out his son at the beginning of the book, he wraps everything up really nicely, but everything is a little too convenient in this plot overall. The son ends up being a Mercian agent, and Dominic turns him in. And of course, since he proposed to this girl who's going to be the one, she had to die. So she got shot and killed, and that drives the end of the conflict. And then Dominic does end up killing his nemesis, and but it's a bittersweet victory, right? So, kind of an unfulfilling book, and I'm kind of talking down on it. This is probably the Paul Anderson book I've enjoyed the least so far. I would say a lot of them up until this point had a lot cooler science fiction concepts and other things like that that were really fun. I think the pacing was better on a lot of them, and the relationship really felt a little contrived, you know, given all of the history of like the Bond girls over and over again in these. So, but still, it's a nice end of a saga in a way. And you know, we did have a good beginning, middle, and end. The prose is beautiful because Paul Anderson writes better prose than anybody. His description of planets, when you get into that, are just, it's poetic almost. I wish I could emulate that. It's just beautiful. Every time I come across it, I just want to stop and reread it again. So there's good, there's bad. You know, this was not my favorite of the Flandre saga. However, I mean, like, there's so many stories. I mean, these volumes themselves, I think this is volume, I don't know, 4 or 5 or something like that out of this deal. I don't know. I should know this. I should know this before making the review, right? I should script these things. Don't know. All right. But there's several of these volumes, and they contain multiple books apiece. This is the last book in this volume, and then there's the last and final volume of this next, which is Flandre's Legacy. I'll probably be getting to that soon, as I would like to finish this up. So if you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed science fiction, you might enjoy this. I would start with Ensign Flandre is the book, and I don't know what Bane book it's labeled in, but I would start with that one, and then I would read from there if you're interested in this series. Like and subscribe, you do the drill. Leave a comment if you've read this or read any of Paul Anderson's works. I'd be interested to hear from you. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.